Imagine describing a movie to someone who had never seen one and then asking them to review it. Let's talk about Backrooms.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We are back, the Eye of the Storm podcast. So, today we're going to be discussing or debating Backrooms. But before we get into that, you already know what time it is, movie recommendation time. A movie I would recommend. I didn't watch much movies this weekend, but a movie that I did manage to squeeze in was a film called Fuze. It was literally based on a bank heist. There's a lot of mystery in it because obviously who the people that you think is involved isn't really involved, so they're pretty much getting played. So the film is mainly based on a bunch of people getting played. I wouldn't say you have to figure out, you just have to follow the film and and just see what's going on. In terms of why I would recommend it, is because it's very like there's unexpected moments. That being said, it did kind of have like a rash finish. Felt like they could have gone in, like they could have fleshed out a bit more, if that makes sense. Because it did feel kind of abrupt. That being said, everything that I did see before the ending was really good. I would definitely say that was worth to watch. If you are disappointed with the end, just ignore the ending. Just everything before that is pretty good. But I would definitely recommend it.
So it's a pretty standard heist movie, or what's going on?
It's a heist movie, literally just a heist movie. I don't want to kind of like spoil it. It's very hard to explain the film without spoiling it, but there's a bunch of guys that and they're not a team. It seems because they're not really like in terms of their relationships to each other, they don't really go into that. So you don't know if they're friends, families, whatever. It just seems like they're just business partners involved in a heist. But they use a decoy to kind of like get an area in London to evacuate based on what they use as a decoy. And then it kind of like unravels from there and gets worse and worse, if that makes sense. Because when I say worse and worse, in terms of like the deception, who's really involved in the heist and who's really getting played. So the army's involved, the police involved, and then you got a bunch of criminals that are involved.
I just remembered it. This from like a month ago, right? Like this is a current one.
Was it a month ago or was it like 2 months ago? But yeah.
Yeah, but
It was a
recent
Sky movie. Yeah.
that kind of slipped past me, and I think it wasn't showing in a lot of theaters as well. I think I tried, and there just weren't any convenient showings near me.
The ending was pretty. But to be fair, I don't think you would have mind because I think everything before that you would have been like, okay, because you're not really the type of person that cares about endings a lot of the times. So I think you would have maybe enjoyed everything before that.
I mean, I usually care a lot about endings, and to me, like a really bad ending can really wreck a movie, but it really depends on the movie. It really depends on what kind of movie it is and what it's trying to do and whether or not the ending undermines that or whatever. Like, it really depends on the case.
I mean, not caring in the sense where majority of endings in films you think are bad.
Yeah. So yeah, I might check that out on streaming. So is it on streaming already, or did you watch it in
It was on
theaters?
Sky.
Sky, okay. All right, I might check that out when I get a chance. I always like a good heist movie, and they don't make many of those recently. So whenever one comes out that's actually good and exciting, I'm kind of there for it. And yeah, let's see. All right, my best thing I watched last week was Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment 23, which is a 2012 sitcom which follows the story of June, who moves to New York. And when she loses her dream job in finance, she has to find an apartment quickly, otherwise, she'll be homeless. And she moves in with this other woman, Chloe, who essentially pays the bills by running scams. And June is her victim because she runs the scam where she gets a roommate, pockets the deposit, and then acts like the worst person ever. So they move out and don't get their deposit back. And June is so desperate and so stubborn that it doesn't work, and they kind of become friends. From there on, they get into wacky hijinks. Like there's the pervert neighbor, and one of their friends is James Vanderbeek playing himself as a washed-up actor. If you don't know who that is, he was in Dawson's, like he was huge in the 90s in Dawson's Creek, and he kind of plays a stylized version of himself where he's kind of trying to get back into acting, and it doesn't quite work out, and he kind of just hangs out with these two women, and things get wacky and crazy, and kind of fizzles out towards the end of the second season. But there's like a season and a half of solid wacky sitcom plots that are quite entertaining, and it's funnier and smarter, I think, than most sitcoms. And it's just a wild ride because Chloe specifically gets up to like the weirdest hijinks, and she's this New York party girl who kind of scams her way through life, and she's always got a plan or a hustle or whatever. And June basically tries to just be her friend because she's like this small town, like idealistic person, and she's trying to reform Chloe, and at the same time not lose the apartment and that sort of thing. So it is not like it's almost a satire of sitcoms because the plots make no sense and they have no bearing to reality, but they are just gets increasingly out there and unhinged, and it's a lot of fun. So that's my recommendation.
How many seasons of this is there?
26 episodes total.
And when did it come out?
2012 and 13.
Okay. Where did you watch it? Sorry.
I'm actually not sure. I think it's on Disney Plus in the UK. I'd have to look it up. But yeah, so it's like one of those shows that made zero impact on anything, but I've watched it maybe 4 times through over the years. Like every couple of years, I just binge it in 2 days, and it's just a good time. Because it's one of those shows that's very short. Like in the last couple of episodes, they run out of steam a little bit. But up until that point, it's just like very high energy, and they just had enough ideas for fun plots that it never gets old. It doesn't get old until that point. And yeah, that just makes it a fun watch.
Okay.
And because it's like a 20-minute sitcom, there's not a huge investment. You can kind of just like watch an episode over dinner or something and have a good time with it. And there's not a lot of continuity between the episodes, as in like
so
an
it's like
ongoing
closed
story.
episodes.
It is a sitcom, yeah, like an old school sitcom. To me, that's a positive. Like there isn't like a big arc in terms of where they're going. They just have like an adventure every episode, and I'm all up for that. So yeah, a bit of a hidden gem. I think I've never seen anybody else really talk about it very much. Like it's not one of those high profile sitcoms, and I think it got canceled as well, like in its second season. And I don't know. Maybe I just missed kind of the memo where people like everybody knows this and everybody kind of knows what it is. But to me, this has always been like one of those hidden sitcom gems where they just did some weird stuff for 2 seasons and then got canceled, and then like nothing happened like with the show. But yeah, it's worth a watch.
Okay, cool. Well, looks like it's time for the main event. Backrooms. Danny G, please do your thing.
So Backrooms is a science fiction psychological horror film about the idea of backrooms, which are kind of these liminal spaces that kind of exist outside of reality, and that basically shouldn't exist and defy all logic and are just creepy and unsettling by themselves. And the story follows Clark, who is a failed architect and furniture store owner, who in the basement of his furniture store discovers the entrance to these back rooms, and he starts exploring them, and he starts trying to make sense of them. And that sets off a chain of events that does not end well, and things escalate from there. So what did we think of Backrooms?
Act 1 was great. Act 2, the middle of Act 2 was still great. After that, it became good, and I'll say Act 3 was all right. I liked the movie. I appreciated the touch of, not even the touch, I appreciated the whole, obviously, the theme of real world trauma revolving around an infinite maze of rooms, different rooms. So it was a nice touch, as well as the aesthetic look. You know what I'm saying? The yellow rooms. It kind of felt like I don't know, the rooms just kind of matched the theme in a way. It kind of felt just depressing in a sense. I don't know how to explain it, but it just did. That performances were great. Like I said, the issue I did have with Act 3, there was some things I was like, okay, that doesn't really make sense, but it's fine. I can kind of excuse it. But I just loved the whole handheld footage type of film vibe that was like in the beginning. The way that the film started was great for me. And I love handheld footage films, found footage movies. So just the look of the film and just, I think they did a lot of things right. But of course, it's not a perfect movie. I will say it is, I don't want to say overrated, but I will say the reaction to the movie I believe is more so for young directors rather than the movie itself. The movie is not bad. Like I said, it was a good movie. You guys should go and watch it, and I understand why it's, doing great in the box office sales. However, I do think it's because of the whole give young creators a chance trend which is going on recently, which is why the movie is way bigger than the film itself, if that makes sense. Because if this was just based on the film itself, and let's say it was an old creator that made this film, I don't think it would have received as much hype and recognition. So yeah, but overall, good movie. I had a good time. Got me more motivated to make my own movies. I keep saying this after good movies, but yeah, I'll definitely recommend this one for you guys.
So I was skeptical going into this, mostly because I was aware of the Backrooms, and that never quite made sense to me in the sense of I get that these images are creepy and unsettling, and like there's just something off about them, and that's the appeal. And I honestly kind of like that there's something that like there's a Gen Z genre of horror that is not simply jump scares. Because when you watch the original Backroom stuff, there aren't really jump scares there. It's all about the vibe and the environment and the creepy mood, and I really like that. But I was never really convinced that the concept of the Backrooms had enough legs to do anything with it other than just be a couple of creepy images. In this movie, I think does its best with the concept, but it kind of confirmed my suspicion that there's not a lot there in terms of what can you actually do with this. Because the movie itself follows Clark as he explores the Backrooms for much of it, but maybe that's maybe a third of the movie. The other 2/3 are his backstory and his personal issues and what he's grappling with and all of that. And that is all added on top of what was already there about the Backrooms. In order to expand on this idea into movie length, they basically added stuff on top that wasn't there in the original. And I think that's by far the weakest part. What really works about this is Clark honestly being a complete jerk. Like, he's not a good person. He's not nice. He's not misunderstood. He's just like a grumpy, angry person who finds himself in the situation, has to deal with it. And I think that's the most interesting part of this. And then just watching Clark and later other characters explore the back rooms, and they get weirder and weirder, and they just shouldn't be there. Like, I think that part is really, really effective. And this feeling of this is just an empty room, but something's off about it, and nobody would ever build something like this. So like there's something else going on. I think that's really effective. But they kind of have like two tricks like that they kind of go to over and over again, and then they staple a personal story on top that I don't think is very interesting. I like it works, it makes sense, but I don't think it's very interesting. And so I'm not sure that the movie really holds up, other than being a valiant attempt. And I'm kind of impressed that it exists in the first place. But I'm not sure as a story there's all that much there. Let's talk about it.
I think even though it's marketed as the mystery of the back rooms being the selling point of the film, I don't think it's that when you watch it. I think it's mainly a movie because you pretty much use this language in terms of like the feeling and the tone of the movie, and just getting that, just feeling that offness, if that makes sense. And I think they executed that really well, just the feeling and the tone of it. In terms of obviously, you know, the big revelation at the end and the revelation of the back rooms and what the mystery actually was and how it kind of like transpired into the last act. I don't think that was too great, but it wasn't really anything out of the ordinary, if that makes sense. It was pretty much expected, especially when I forgot what his name was, but he was in the morning show. But he's like one of the scientists, or I don't know, one of the inventors or scientists, whatever. At the end, when he was introduced, then that's when it's pretty much. So I think it's kind of like there's hints in terms of what the Backrooms actually is. But I think once with his introductions, when he's actually watching the screen and seeing Clark in the screen, it's pretty much evident as to what's going on. For me personally, I said, okay, this is just some sort of room. It's an invention. It's not something, paranormal is what I'm trying to say. So
that's not what it is.
it's not
So
paranormal.
it depends on how you define it, but what Async is doing is that they discovered the back rooms and then have started exploring them. So they've put up cameras. They go on these missions where I don't think that's in the movie very much. It's more in the original YouTube series where they kind of just send expeditions into the back rooms and they try to map them out and they try to kind of just study it. And they are behind stuff like the cameras and like this cardboard cutout that plays this recording. Async put that there, kind of in their attempt to study the back rooms. So as they are exploring the back rooms, they realize that other people are there as well, and they run into Clark in that way. So they didn't create the back rooms, and they're not the villains. They're just an organization exploring that place. And so they know a little bit more than Clark and Mary do, but they fundamentally are just studying the back rooms.
My bad. Yeah, I got that completely wrong. I don't know why I thought that. So I think probably my first question is, obviously this film is framed around real world trauma and kind of like basing it in the Backrooms. And we already know the backstory. This was based on a short film. So do you think the theme of real world trauma was a good way to extend the storyline for the short film into a feature, or do you think they should have gone a different route?
So it makes them a lot less alien or weird, right? It's becomes all very relatable because now they're just echoes of people's memories. And that's kind of it. Like that's why they're so mundane and that's why they're warped. It's like a copy of a copy, right? And I think the imagery, like of the people who are just a little bit wrong. So the pirate and all these different, I think Wikipedia calls them still lives, right? So just things that look like people, but they're kind of twisted and they have too many eyes and too many limbs or too few or whatever. And it just makes it very small and very, very relatable in a bad way, I think. Like, I'm not a huge fan of the Backrooms. I'm just looking at this as something that is like as a new idea, right? And the idea of exploring these creepy, unnatural spaces that shouldn't exist is kind of cool. And that they kind of hint at a larger reality that we can't really understand and handle. All very cool. But then they're just our memories. And it's like that's not bad exactly, but like, what's the appeal? Like, why does it make it more interesting? I would actually have preferred it if they had not given an explanation and just kept it as a weird place that works according to some rules we don't understand. And then a story happens in them. I think that would have been a better approach. And the one we got instead was not that interesting, honestly.
I see what you mean. I don't really know how I feel. I didn't think it was exceptional, but I still thought it was cool. And I thought it was, okay, this is a nice touch, like I said in the beginning. The Backrooms in general was just like a room filled with past and failures, if that makes sense. And the failures in terms of like, even the characters were kind of like a representation of them. Like each, you obviously saw the different type of eyes, the mouths, just the aesthetic and the monster look. So in a way that kind of backed up that point that I'm making justified, if that makes sense. So yeah, I thought it was cool. I didn't think, like I said, I didn't think they did anything out the ordinary. For me, it was just more so the feeling and the tone I was getting from the Backrooms, which was my favorite experience about the movie. I do hear what you're saying. I can't really add much to that. Well, one thing I do want to mention was Act 1. I'll just say Clark's story in the beginning was really, really good. From the point where Clark got captured and then it cut to black, I'll just say that there for me, I was just like engulfed. It made sense that it kind of like ended there and it switched to her story. Her story was cool, but even though it still kind of digressed in terms of, I want to say quality of the film and just in terms of me liking the movie, I'll just say everything before that was great. How did you feel about the first part of the movie? Because like you said, it was one, like his story was kind of like 1/3 of the film.
Yeah, so like the basic exploration of the Backrooms, I think really works and it's really interesting. The problem is that there's not much there. Like it's kind of like weird proportions and weird angles and furniture melting into the ground. And that's about it, just in terms of weird stuff. By far my favorite sequence was when Mary is trying to get away from Pirate Clark. And she is kind of on this ledge that goes down to infinity. And like there's this like a silo kind of thing where like there's just floor after floor after floor, and like there's just a drop that goes down forever. And there's a staircase just hanging in space going up to the ceiling, and there's a door on the ceiling. And she has to crawl up this staircase with no handrails, no nothing, while the monster is pursuing her. And that was really cool. Like that was something where I said, yeah, this is like out of an MC Escher painting. Like this is really enjoyable. And then the rest of it, like once you go past the initial weirdness of the Backrooms, it's like, okay, so there's like chairs halfway stuck into the wall. But you see that like 20 times. I think what this really needed to do was to expand what this is about. Like it doesn't really get that twisted. It just gets kind of blurry. Not blurry, but it kind of gets kind of all melted into each other, right? Like it's as if like this was like made out of like wax and they kind of left the heating on for too much, and so kind of stuff melted into each other. That's kind of the image that's being referenced over and over. After the 10th time, it was just, yeah, again, like this, it's another room that looks like the ones before. And that is the part that I thought was a little bit underwhelming. And if this movie had turned into like this fever dream of impossible geometries and weird images and room layouts that shouldn't exist or that would never exist, but clearly here they are, and you know what I mean? Like just like take 2 steps further in terms of how weird the Backrooms are. Or go all out in terms of it's just an infinite room, like an infinite, like one room after the other, and it just keeps going on forever. And it's just like that by itself is impossible, right? And unsettling because it never ends and you can never get anywhere and it never starts, it never finishes. And like they do connect this to certain things, right? In the story where Clark never finishes anything and he never starts anything. He's just kind of stuck in between. The term liminal means being in transition between two things, right? And Clark is kind of stuck in the transition between two things, like the life he wanted, which is to be an architect and to be married to his wife. I forget her name now. That didn't work out. And so he pivoted to running a furniture store. And that never quite took off, and he never quite found success in that. But he's been unable to fully commit to that new idea and let go of the past, or try to fix the past and then not spend all his time on this failed business, right? He's kind of stuck in between and he has nowhere to go. And that is kind of a reflection of what the Backrooms are like. And then Mary, on the other hand, is like a successful professional, but her defining experience is having committed her mother into psychiatric care, essentially having given up on her. Like, she tried to help her mother and she couldn't. And so she kind of gave up by having her mother committed. And she's kind of holding on to this memory of when everything was fine in the form of this concrete, like slab of concrete that was her handprint from their house before they had to sell the house because of her mother's mental illness. And so she's dedicated her life to helping people move on and find their new destination and go on these journeys, because she couldn't do that with her mother. She's trying to atone for that in some way. And she even says that when Clark asks her, have you ever given up on somebody? And she says, almost never. Meaning the one time she did, it was the one person that mattered the most to her, and that has been haunting her. And so she's being haunted by her memories that, much like the Backrooms, are distorted, right? Because if you go over something in your head over and over, it kind of becomes worse over time, like especially if you regret something. Each time you go over it in your head, it gets a little bit worse and a little bit more unbearable. And that is kind of by itself a metaphor for the Backrooms, or the Backrooms are a metaphor for that. So I kind of get what they're doing. I'm just not sure, I'm not sure it's all that interesting, if I'm being honest. Especially because I think it clashes with the idea that the Backrooms are incomprehensible, that they just exist, but they shouldn't exist. And just the fact that they're there, like, it's not a scary image exactly, right? It's just an empty office building. But the reason it's scary is because it's wrong. It can't exist and it shouldn't exist. And that by itself, and just reality not being what you thought it was, is the scary part. And so making it too comprehensible and too predictable is something that I think undermines the appeal, at least to me, of what liminal spaces are all about. And then it just becomes a metaphor for just trauma. It's like, are we doing this again? Like, can you not come up with anything else that could haunt people, or that people could have regrets about, or that they have to deal with in some way? I don't know. It felt massively like, once we got to kind of Act 3 and Clark just explains what's going on because he figured all of this out off screen, and then he explains it to Mary. I was like, that's it. Like, that's the Backrooms. Is that all you got?
Have you seen the series From?
No, I've not. I've heard bad things about it.
Okay, but damn. But in terms of that series, right, everyone's waiting for the mystery in terms of what the hell was this place. Now, the reason why I bring that up, I think season 4 is the last season, and I haven't watched it yet. But that's pretty much where you're going to get the answers. Now, if, personally for me, and I feel like many other people will feel the same, if the answer is from, like, the town that they're in is just there and there's no reason as to why these people were put there or how to leave, I'm pretty sure people will get pissed off. And I think Backrooms kind of has that similar, it would have that similar reaction if Backrooms was just there rather than there actually being answers for its existence. Because, like I said, the main selling point of the movie is, what the hell is this place? Especially with the short film. Everyone's watching the short film like, yo, this place looks weird. Like,
have you seen it?
So yeah, I saw it.
The whole 3 hours?
No, not the whole 3 hours. I just saw one of the short films when they're mainly just in the Backrooms itself. I don't know how many times they were in the Backrooms throughout the 3 hours, but I saw the one where they're actually in the rooms.
So Kane Parsons is the guy who directed this, and he basically made, just at 15, basically made this short, like this YouTube series, right? Basically teaching himself special effects and kind of expanding on this idea of the Backrooms. Like, he didn't invent them, but he kind of turned them into this thing. I watched some interviews with him, and he basically says he's a big planner. He does not like fake outs. He does not like when shows are making stuff up as they go along. He's got the whole thing mapped out, and it's a very specific narrative with a very specific timeline, and there is a correct explanation of what the Backrooms are, and nobody's figured it out, right? He says there's one person, he found one Reddit comment of somebody that figured it out, and it got no attention. So somewhere out there is the correct explanation of what the Backrooms are, as intended, and people just don't know. I'm actually kind of curious now to kind of follow this as like the series goes on, because as presented in the movie, it's not that complex and it's not that involved, right? And I don't know if, like, it's possible that Clark doesn't have the full story, or that he's just wrong, or it's just him coping with his situation by coming up with a story, and then a later movie, like a sequel, will kind of show that this is not what this is at all. But again, the movie itself seems kind of conclusive, right? Like everything we see in the movie is consistent with that, right? I didn't notice any kind of big detail that contradicts what Clark says, especially since the movie ends on backrooms that are reflections of Mary's memories, her therapist office and the house she grew up in, both of them. It ends on a still life of her, where she's sitting in the async facility being debriefed and being interviewed, and the backroom image of her doing that is the last still of the movie, which had zero impact on me at all, because it's not like that's something tragic. It's just she's involved with the backrooms, and so her memories are turning into backrooms. That's just what they do, right? So like this whole thing, I don't know, is all that involved and all that compelling as presented in this movie, I thought.
Do you think the backrooms could be a place where as soon as you walk through those doors, it analyzes, sees your traumas, and then creates rooms revolving around it? Because with Clark, was there any rooms? I don't remember, but were there any rooms that were related to Clark? Isn't the right word I'm trying to use, but were revolved around Clark's psychological prison, isolation, his trauma?
So one of the still lives is his wife. So remember when he's in the kitchen and he's confronting Mary, and there's this red-headed woman standing in the background, and he cuts off her hair and puts it on Mary as a wig, right? That's his wife.
Yeah.
So that is kind of a memory of his old home.
Okay.
And that is also why the woman freaks out when Pirate Clark shows up. She just runs into a corner and keeps running, which was a cool image, right? Like that kind of really highlighted that this place is kind of like an echo of our world, but these are not people, right? They kind of just imitate our memories, right? And then there's Pirate Clark himself, which is a reflection of him kind of dwelling on what he has to do to run this business, and he hates every minute of it. And then some of the furniture in some of the back rooms are furniture he sells in his store. So the ones he explores are at least in part related to Clark. And then there's another one where Bobby, the boyfriend, goes down this chute, right? And he encounters a room full of laundry. And he picks up a shirt. That's the same shirt that he wore earlier in the movie. It's like a white t-shirt that says "End Apartheid." And then like a replica of it is in the back rooms.
Okay.
And it's just weird, right? Because it's a shirt it's his shirt, right?
Yeah.
So all the characters that go into the back rooms see reflections of things they know and remember.
But isn't the point... Do you feel like the point of the backrooms is to want to escape the backrooms? But in terms of it's like, because for example, remember there was a scene between Clark and Mary where he says he feels comfortable, he wants to stay in the backrooms, and then she says, "You can stay, but let me go." So in a way, he wants to stay in his trauma, he wants to stay in his psychological isolation, and then afterwards he gets killed by the pirate Clark. That scene to me told me, so the backrooms is based on your trauma. It's like, it's based on your trauma. Now, obviously, Mary's character is trying to help you get past your trauma and try to help you get over. You know what I'm saying? Just get over that mental state that you're in, like I said, the trauma. But obviously, Clark wanted to stay in the backrooms. The reason why Mary managed to escape was because she overcame, in a way, her trauma, whereas Clark didn't want to. And obviously, he just wanted to stay in that isolation, and obviously, which triggered his death. So you enter your isolation, you enter your trauma.
So what seems to be the case with Clark is that he is just not a very nice person. He always blames everybody else for his problems. He's not self-reflective. He basically just pities himself and is resentful towards others. And it may even be that some of it is justified, but he's just not dealing with it in a healthy way, right? The important part is that this prevents him from thriving, and it prevents him from moving on and just trying something else, right? Like that is why he's stuck in this not very thriving environment. And I think the way he engages with the back rooms is kind of a reflection of that, because he obsessively dwells on the details, right? And he just cannot let anything go, and he cannot move on from anything. That is why the monster is Pirate Clark, right? And that is kind of why he kind of doesn't want to leave, right? Because he has nothing to go back to, and he doesn't think his life will ever get any better. And so kind of being the king of hell in a way, or his personal hell, is better than just existing in the real world, right? To him, the real world is not all that great. It's kind of my impression.
But why did he end up killing Clark though? The private Clark.
Why did Pirate Clark end up killing Clark?
Yeah.
Because it's a toxic emotion. It's something that gnaws on you. Like if you have like, imagine having like a memory that's kind of like a regret or like your biggest failure or something, and you keep replaying it over and over in your head. It starts consuming you. And that is what Pirate Clark is. Like that is given literal form in the Backrooms. So Pirate Clark kills Clark because his regrets and his resentment, like Pirate Clark isn't really about his failure. It's about his failure because he has to debase himself, creating these commercials and playing this character in order to sell couches, right? And he resents that, and he considers it his greatest failure, and he can only deal with it by blaming other people for it. And so the Pirate Clark entity ends up consuming him in a way, or ends up destroying him. He cannot overcome it. He cannot coexist with it. He cannot get rid of it. It will just keep coming, and it will destroy him when he gets there. And he's in denial about it, right? He tries to reason with it because he's under the illusion that, or like the other still lives are manageable, right? Like one of the things Clark likes about this is that there's nobody else to talk back to him, right? Like there's nobody who can disappoint him. Everybody's just a prop for his situation, right? It's for his for his benefit. And Pirate Clark is the one exception because that is something that is actually coming after him and like pursuing him, and that will never let go of him, and that he can never escape. So as a metaphor, I think it works perfectly fine. And I think it's pretty obvious what it is. But like that's why it ends up killing him.
I see.
And that is why Mary kills or gets rid of Pirate Clark by smashing the piece of concrete into his face. Because it's not just a memento. It's something that she carries with her to her office. She's got it on her nightstand. She's got it in her pocket when she goes to the Ottoman Empire, right, to the furniture store. And which makes no sense at all. Like, even if like this is like your big crutch, why do you not just have it in a drawer and look at it from time to time, right? So that's maybe a little bit reaching, but it represents her big regret, right? And her inability to move on from that one perfect moment that she can never get back. And so that becomes a weapon to destroy the toxic memory of Pirate Clark, or that is created by somebody who cannot move on at all. And she moves on by taking the piece of concrete and smashing it into Pirate Clark, defeating him in this way, but it destroys the memento. She can kill the hostile memory by destroying her own memory, and once that doesn't exist anymore, she's free to move on. That's kind of what that is. Just as a metaphor, I think it's pretty clear, and it works just fine. I just don't know what it has to do with Backrooms.
I don't know what to say. I have no idea what to say to that. Besides, okay. But in terms of what it has to do with the Backrooms, because it's never ending. Do you know what I'm saying? So if that's never ending, then it's a reflection of the character itself in terms of their mental state.
It's basically a place that makes memories literal. And if you have toxic or hostile memories, it's a threat. And if it's an oppressive memory, it's something that haunts you forever, and so on, right? And you're basically confronted with a mirror image of the thing that haunts you, right? That's basically what that is. Like I said, like as a memory, like as a metaphor, I think it makes perfect sense.
But yeah, I do still think the Backrooms has adaptability in terms of whoever comes in, it adapts to their mental state. That's why maybe actually no, I can't say that because Mary, they did try and kill her. Because I was gonna say obviously they killed off the two people that were working for Clark straight away. Of course, everyone's got trauma, but maybe their trauma wasn't as traumatic enough for them to be kept into the Backrooms.
They're pretty young, and we don't see anything that really drives them in that way. Maybe it takes somebody like Clark and Mary, who's just haunted by this one memory or this one regret. When the emotion is that strong, that's where it kind of takes over the Backrooms, maybe. That's possible. And with Bobby and Kat, there's nothing in the movie that suggests that they have something like this. And so they get little details like the t-shirt and whatever.
The ending still kind of like keeps the mystery though, because your main point was maybe they didn't need to be like a reasoning for the Backrooms, they just exist. You know what I'm saying? So, but that kind of did end that way as well, because then you say the scientist was asking questions to Mary to tell him anything that she can in terms of like her experience in the Backrooms. Obviously, they want to learn the rooms itself. So that ends off with the Backrooms ending mysteriously because they still don't know what the rooms are.
Yeah.
Doesn't that fulfill your criteria?
But Clark has a pretty complete description of it. And again, he might be wrong. It might be just what applies to him. But first of all, I think it's lame that he figures this out off screen between scenes, essentially, and apparently within a few days, because Mary kind of goes looking for him when he kind of misses like 1 or 2 appointments. And so between when he gets lost in the back rooms and when she goes to look for him, it must be a few days. And in that time off screen, he arrives at a pretty complete picture of what the back rooms are. I just don't think that's interesting. I think they're more interesting if they're kind of this inexplicable mystery and you slowly get more and more hints, but you never get the full picture. And like this idea that this entire organization full of scientists has been studying the backrooms for who knows how long and just has no idea. And then some guy comes along and just figures it out in 2 days. I don't know how that's better. I really like this idea of people discover like a parallel dimension, like Stranger Things season 1 was kind of like this, right? Where there's just this parallel dimension and you can access it by accident. And then people start studying it. And over time you learn more and more about it and you kind of begin to control it maybe a little bit, or you learn that it can't be controlled, but you start learning what the hazards are. And so you start developing countermeasures and whatever. To me, that's a cool idea. And to me, that's one of the ideas of what's cool about the backrooms. Like this idea that with all their combined intellect and resources, they can barely avoid getting killed by going like into the wrong place. And then Clark's discovery, I just don't buy it. I don't know why he can figure stuff out that they can't. I don't know why he can do it in 2 days. I don't know why that makes the backrooms more interesting. When you watch the original short movies, there's like weird stuff, like they do things like they carry a rope to connect them to the entrance and they still get lost. And the backrooms still mess them up and people still clip in and out of the backrooms. And there's like a scene in the original, like in the YouTube shorts, where a guy gets lost in the back rooms and then kind of talks to a guy through the wall, some random stranger, and tries to convince him that he's not a burglar, that he's stuck in this weird place, and he just doesn't have the words for it, and there's no way for him to prove any of it, but he just wants to go home, and there's no way out. That's cool. That's much more interesting than what they did with Clark here, I think.
But I think the scientists are trying to figure out the mechanics of the room. So it's not necessarily why, but they're trying to figure out how, whereas Clark discovered the why. So I get what you're saying, but I don't think Clark explains how they came to be. He just says, this is what it is.
Which is the same thing, really. Like, he doesn't know why the backrooms exist, but he has a pretty complete picture of how they work.
Yeah, but that's why I said I think the scientists are just trying to figure out, okay, how, do they work?
But they haven't even gotten this far. They seem to know a lot less than Clark does.
You think? Where would you get that impression?
Mostly from the way Phil behaves when he debriefs Mary. Like they seem desperate to learn anything.
But he did ask her experiences, as in like what she saw.
Yeah, that's why he asks her, because they need any information they can get.
Exactly. But if you ask someone what they saw, for me, that tells me they're trying to, number one, they're trying to see what they missed. You know what I'm saying? So, you know what I'm saying, more rooms that they may not have discovered. Collecting as much information as they can to just figure out what the rooms are and how they work. Personally, for me, is how I took it.
They just seem really desperate and really afraid of them. Just how the async people behave and how Phil behaves and talks in that scene. That's just the impression I got.
Yeah, but that's justified though, in terms of just kind of like the anxiety and the worry, because they don't know what the rooms are.
It just looks like a mismatch, right? It seems to me like it's not like they have certain, like she has this one piece of information that's been eluding them. No, they seem to be completely in the dark. I don't know. Maybe that's just how it came across to me, but it just felt weird. Like that, again, like I don't want to repeat myself too much, right? But it just seemed a little bit strange because it doesn't seem earned. Like I'm not seeing what unique thing Clark did that nobody else could have done to get this information. It just comes to him. In that contrast to all these scientists just have no clue. Like that's just a little bit weird.
Yeah, just to kind of add to that, if Clark did really know, then why the hell did he get killed?
Because he was in denial about being able to manage his memories. Because he thinks he can control Pirate Clark, and then he can't. But then when he finds out that he can't, it's too late. So, I don't know. That's just what it seems to me. I think one thing that we haven't really gotten into yet is, are the backrooms scary?
I would say they are. Now, when you say scary, are you asking that question based on, like, is it just like the room itself, or a mixture of how it was shot, the look?
Like, was the movie scary?
It was creepy and unsettling. I wouldn't say full-blown scary, but it was definitely creepy and unsettling. It just felt, like I said, the yellow felt like a true reflection of their mental state. It just felt like fatigue, you know what I'm saying? Mixed with it never ending, mixed with the look. because it was the found footage type of look, mixed with, like I said, the A24 look, which always looks great. And also the fear of if the room that they're going to go to, if the door's locked or if the door isn't locked. There was a multitude of things for me where I was like, this is really great in terms of just the tone of things and just that creepy and unsettling feeling, just being locked in the place, like just not knowing. It felt like a maze. Like it reminded me of, I don't know if you ever watched this game show, but called Takeshi Castle, and there was a maze game where you don't know which door was, like, someone was chasing you and you had to find pretty much the exit, and there was like the different doors and you don't know which door was unlocked or locked, and it just kind of, like, you know what I'm saying, especially when they were getting chased, you get that type of anxiety type of feeling that I used to get when I was watching Takeshi Castle. So yeah, for me it was creepy and unsettling.
I've got another Japanese game show comparison.
What was that?
So there's I don't know what it's called, but there's a Japanese game show where contestants go into a room and anything in that room could be cake. So every object in the room could be made of cake that has been made to look like the real thing. And that includes things like the door handles and, like, I don't know, the flowers or the flower vase or a book on the table or something. And basically have to find the thing that's real in order to get out of the room. And so they will just bite into random things. And half the time it's cake and half the time it's not. And you just cannot tell. Like, it's done so well that you cannot tell by looking at it. You have to just bite into it. And half the time it's cake and half the time it's not.
When it's not, is it actual door?
The door handle could be cake or it could be a real door handle.
Okay, yeah, okay, cool.
And the same goes for every object in the room.
Yeah. Okay,
You have to find, I don't know if the objective is to find the cake or find the real thing or what, but like that's the idea. And it kind of leads to people just biting into like table legs and whatever because they have to find the cake. That kind of surreal, you don't know what's real, nothing makes sense kind of feeling, I think I get from the Backrooms. And I think, first of all, the basic idea of them, I think, has grown on me. If you just look at the image, it's just a room. But I think in video form, if you are going through endless hallways of rooms that are just oppressive, right? Like the fluorescent lights and the yellow carpet and wallpaper, and just the rooms just keep coming, and there's just no end to it, and there's no purpose to any of it. And every once in a while, there will just be a weird room with just the door in the wrong place or something, or just a tiny door or whatever it is, right? I think that's really grown on me. I think that's really effective, especially if you follow a character who has to endure this for like room after room, right? Like the effect doesn't just come from, oh, look how creepy this room is. It's from you go to a room and then you go to another, into another, and it just never stops. And it never starts making sense. And that is something that eventually becomes oppressive. And I think that's really cool. What's also cool about the Backrooms is that people clip into them. Like there's like like if you watch the YouTube series, a lot of the episodes start with somebody just doing something and then just falling through the floor and they're in the Backrooms. Like no rhyme or reason. It just happens. And this idea that reality is glitching is terrifying. The idea that you walked on a road and then you just fall through the road and then you're in a place you cannot escape. It's really cool. All of these things are really undermined in this movie, I thought, because there's no real danger, right? Like people never get lost. It never weighs on them, really. They're scared a little bit. And I think just like the emotional aspect of it, I think this movie does quite well in terms of actors portraying just how weird this is and how disorienting it is. But there's never a real sense of peril, really, like until the monster shows up. But just by itself, like this idea that you just cannot escape this, you will die here. Like you will never see the sunlight again. Is something that's just missing because they can just enter and leave, like until the very end, right? Like when Mary gets lost in the Backrooms in the end, up until that point, they can just leave and they keep coming and going at will, right? Like for instance, in the YouTube series, there's like a scene where an async team goes into the Backrooms and they're really scared about going too far, and they have like this lifeline that connects them to the entrance. And one of them gets separated from the team, and then they just glitch out of existence. And he just cannot find his way back because all their safety measures just stopped existing. The Backrooms being an irrational place that just does not follow basic rules of logic is what makes it so terrible, because if it is not logical, then there's nothing you can do, right? Like the thing that makes the world bearable, like dangers, like diseases and whatever, bearable in the real world, is that if you try hard enough, eventually you will understand them, and then you can behave in ways that prevent the danger, right? Like when COVID happened, just to go to everybody's favorite example, when COVID happened, it was really scary in the first couple of months because we didn't know what it was, we didn't know how bad it was going to get. But regardless of what your attitude to COVID was, regardless of your politics, anything, regardless of how you handled it, deep down, everybody believed that sooner or later there would be a treatment, and there would be a vaccine, and things would go back to normal. nobody believed that this was the end of the world. And we all behaved accordingly, right? We all thought, okay, on average, pandemics last 2 years. And yeah, guess what? We had 2 winters in lockdown. And then we went back to normal. The point is like this, like we live in a world in which dangers are comprehensible. That is why you just have to wait long enough and eventually they become solved. Like no matter how scary it is, no matter how confusing, no matter how challenging it is, sooner or later it will be solved. Like that's been the case in everything. That's the case with COVID. It's the case with global warming. It's the case with nuclear war. Like everything that can mess us up is solvable because it's understandable. And the backrooms are not understandable and therefore they're not solvable. That's why that's scary. And I feel like the movie, it's not like it forgets this, but I think it doesn't lean into it because it becomes a little bit too routine throughout the movie, I thought.
I think the reason why there wasn't that sense of danger amongst the characters was because that was their natural habitat in a way. Because technically there's only 4 characters, and 2 of which, one was really, really scared. So as soon as she went in, she was even very cautious. As soon as she got in, she wants to leave straight away. So she fulfilled that criteria of being scared. Whereas the guy, he was high. So in terms of how he was reacting, made sense. A high guy in a paranormal environment, the sense of danger when you're high is very low. So that made sense for him. But in terms of...
Isn't it the other way around, that the smallest things can freak you out?
Is it? I thought if you're high, you're more chilled zone. And because I've been around people that are high, I've never smoked weed in my life, but I've been around people that are high, and when crazy stuff is going on, they're just like on the couch chilling, just laughing.
Like both of us are the most hardcore gangsters ever, right? But I think weed might be the thing that calms you down, and other things make you paranoid, maybe. I don't know. So yeah, not a big deal, but it seems to me like when your senses are heightened like this, like anything that's weird or not expected can freak you out, I think. And maybe that's just not the case for weed, and they specifically say that it is weed. But I don't think it's that important either. Like she asks him, "Are you high?" And he says, "Yeah, a little, but pot doesn't count." And that's kind of it. But he doesn't behave in weird ways or erratic ways because of this.
The girl, she's the only one, in my opinion, who was generally scared. Like you could tell. Whereas I think with Mary, it was kind of like her natural habitat, and Clark's as well. So which is why I don't think they kind of like felt that, or they weren't showing that, was because with Mary, that's like she grew up being taught that outside is dangerous by her mother. You know what I'm saying? So she was always indoors, and Clark, he was trapped in his own thoughts, as well as trapped in he was living in his home store. Do you get what I'm saying? So with them two, it made sense why they were acting the way that they were acting, and why there wasn't that sense of danger or dread with them. So, and like I said, there's only four actors. So
yeah, I just felt like initially it's really creepy because you don't know what it is, but the more you see about it, the more predictable they become. There's like this sense of sinister threat where, like, yes, there's a creature and that's scary, and the more time we spend in the back rooms and the more we learn and the more we see of the monster, it just becomes kind of mundane. This is one of those old problems of send in 10 guys with guns and you've got it sorted. I don't know why async has such a problem controlling or exploring the back rooms. Just give everybody a gun and then they can shoot Pirate Clark. And then it's fine. There doesn't seem to be any other threat. The backrooms themselves don't seem to be sinister or erratic or unstable. The first act really works, where there is this mystery and the sense of dread, and you have this feeling that anything could be around the corner. And I saw the movie before I saw the YouTube series on purpose. I went in as blind as I could. And not knowing what was around the next corner or what could be around the next corner is what made it scary. And then once I knew, it became a little bit predictable, a little bit safe. Because, like, the still lives don't do anything. The only real threat in there is Pirate Clark. And again, like, Mary defeats him basically with a blunt weapon. So again, send in 5 guys with guns and you've got this thing figured out. That, I think, does a real, like, it's weird that this comes from the same person. Like, does Kane Parsons not understand this? Like, I don't know. He seems like a smart guy, and you see, like, this has been like the last 7 years of his life since he was like 15. He's like 20 now. Like, I don't know how the math works out, but you know what I mean? It's like, this is his life up until this point. So this seems like a basic mistake. And I don't know if this is like studio interference saying, oh, you have to make this more relatable, or this is just he realized that if you stretch it to a movie, you have to add more information, and this is what he came up with. I don't know. It just doesn't seem consistent with the rest. And I think it's not just different, it's also to the detriment of the horror, I think. It's a little bit like in a game, the minute you know how many hit points something has, you can kill it, and that means it's no longer scary. But if you don't know what it is or how strong it is, that's what makes it scary. You know what I mean? And that's the case in any fiction. The minute you know what something is, and its behavior becomes pretty predictable, it stops being scary. I'm not a zoomer, idea. I wasn't there when the original 4chan meme was posted and whatever. This is just a new idea to me. And I think that's interesting to kind of see what like the next generation comes up with, because this is like an organic idea. This is a bit like Slenderman and Obsession and all of that, right? Like this is just people just coming up with stuff. And I think that's cool. And I went into this kind of with open eyes, saying, okay, show me what you got, right? But my big cultural reference point is cosmic horror and weird fiction, because that is also along the lines of reality is terrible. And once you understand, or the more you, like we go through life understanding just a tiny slice of reality, and the more you peel back the onion and the more you get through what's actually real, the less your mind can handle it. And it just becomes too much for humans to deal with. Like that's kind of the horror of cosmic horror. And that's why people have liked it for 100 years. But the way cosmic horror works is that there is something truly alien at the core of reality. And as you learn more about it, a picture starts to form. And the picture is uncomfortable, because it is something that, if true, would be absolutely terrible for humanity and for you and me. You know what I mean? And that, I think, is kind of missing here, where the more, like, there isn't really this sense of they're building towards a revelation of why this is terrible. So, for instance, one thing that's in the YouTube series, again, is this idea that as there are more people in the world, they start remembering stuff more, and that makes the backrooms grow bigger, and that means more people become trapped in them. And so as time goes on, it becomes increasingly inevitable that people will get lost in these things and never find their way back, because they are so unpredictable and incomprehensible. And there's not going to be a point where it just becomes a manageable problem, like earthquakes or something like that, right? Something that is really dangerous, but once you understand it, you can deal with it. That is really completely absent from this movie, I thought. Like, the more we learn about it, the less scary it is. And that's not how it's supposed to go.
Okay, I never knew that concept. That feels bigger than its budget, though.
The liminal space thing has always been zero budget. It's always been about the vibes of an image. Like, that takes zero budget. And I don't think that this would have just required coming up with insights that characters get that kind of start hinting at a greater and terrible truth. I think that's what that would take, and that inherently is not expensive to film. Like, I don't think budget is the reason.
But doesn't it go against the theme of, you know, because obviously the Backrooms is supposed to feel very isolated. So if you've got more people in there, it's just gonna get congested. And if it gets bigger, then it's like, okay, that
an infinite number of people can get lost in the backrooms, and they still never see each other, because infinite is still infinite. That's the thing, right? There comes at no point at which you run into other people by accident, which happens in this movie, right? Because they stumble across like async security cameras and whatever. But this whole thing of infinity is that you can fit an infinite number of infinities inside infinity. Right? Like, that's what infinity means. It's not just big, it's infinite. And so having like this parallel reality that is part of the horror, I think. And compared to that, like the backrooms in this are really small, because people constantly run into each other. Right? Like, every character meets every other character. I don't know. I don't want to crap on this movie too much, because I think, first of all, the fact that a 20-year-old made this is cool. The fact that a studio let a 20-year-old make this is cool. The fact that it's one of the better movies I've seen this year, craft-wise. And I don't know how much of this is to the credit of Kane Parsons versus how much like expert help he got from the studio. It must be a combination of both. But just as a movie, it's more competent in terms of how it looks, in terms of how it's written, in terms of how it's shot, how it flows, than most movies we've seen this year, right? So it's not a bad movie. The reason I'm hung up on this so much is because that's kind of the whole thing. If a horror isn't scary because of how you tell the story, that's a problem. But every other aspect of this is so good. Like, it's not like a lot of the times, like, remember when we talked about Shelby Oaks 8 months ago, and you asked me, like, isn't this a good start? And I said, no, because this is so broken. This is not like somebody who had all the right instincts and just made a few mistakes because of inexperience. But you can see how, with a little bit more experience, this person could have made a much better movie, and so maybe their second or third movie will be much better. Like, Zach Cregger is kind of like this, right? Like, Weapons is a much better movie than Barbarian. But in Barbarian, you can see all the ideas. And it's just the second, third movie is just better. Like, the second movie is better than the first, because the director learned something. And here we have like a first-time director with basically zero experience, was completely self-taught. Like, he basically taught himself 3D rendering software at 15 to make these shorts. And that's cool. And what we're seeing is basically the evolution of that with like expert help and better equipment and technology and all of that. So there's a lot I like about this. And I walked away from this more impressed than I thought it would be, because the trailer is not that great. It doesn't really sell you on what's really going on with the Backrooms. But I think the story kind of derails what this is supposed to be, in my opinion. He's a smart guy. Maybe by Backrooms 3, it will all come together and it will all make sense. And it will be really impressive. I think the guy has enough intelligence and the right attitude and the right skills at this point to pull that off. And if he does, I'll be impressed and I'll clap and I'll say, yeah, good job. I didn't think it was going to go there, but it did, right? Like, I really want it to be like this. But just looking at this movie in isolation, because that's what's out, the story kind of breaks it, I think.
Well, I think that would be a good segue into the last thoughts, unless you had anything else that you wanted to bring up.
No, I think we got it.
Okay. My last thoughts on this film, my overall experience is still the same after today's conversation. I definitely do hear Daniel's opinions as well, and I actually do agree with some of them, probably a lot of them. However, I still think, for me, in terms of the reasoning for the Backrooms, wasn't too important for me. I just think they just caught the atmosphere and the tone of the film, and just that creepy, unsettling vibe they knocked out the park for me, and a mixture of the performances as well. And in terms of the reasoning, let me just kind of go back into what I just said there. I don't want to come off as that person that doesn't care if a movie makes sense or not. I think the movie makes sense. Now, of course, in terms of if the reasoning is like anything special, of course not. As we've discussed in today's discussion, it's not. That being said, for me, the reasoning is sufficient enough for it not to be crap, if that makes sense, mixed with obviously how I felt about the film. So my feelings towards the movie mixed with the reasoning, overall experience, it was good. So hopefully that makes sense. And I'm going to rate this movie a 7. I'm going to rate this one a 7. Good job, young creator.
Yeah, so there's a lot to like about this movie. The vibe of it, for much of it, is good. The look of it is good. Just the fact that it exists is impressive, and probably the most fun thing about a movie I've seen this year, because at least it's a new idea, right? Like, that's kind of the big bonus, right? Like, it's not just a new idea, it's well done generally. It's a proper movie. It hits a nerve. It's not just the same nonsense recycled over and over again. So that's all good. That's a good thing for movies. That's good for this guy's career. This is good for the audience, right? If you like horror, if you like indie horror, if you like just ideas, like new ideas in general, all very much what it's supposed to be. I do think a few story choices in this are not the greatest, and they undermine kind of the appeal of the Backrooms, at least for me. They make them less scary, less unsettling, less eerie, and that is not what that's supposed to be, I don't think. So that's a 5 out of 7, and that's with points deducted for the story. So overall, this is just really good.
All right, guys, thank you very much for tuning into today's discussion.
If you've gotten this far and you like what we do, please tell a friend. And if you hate what we do, please tell an enemy.
All right, guys, you've heard it here first. We'll catch you next time. Au revoir.
Bye-bye.